present to you today on the role of 5G, satellite for 5G in Africa. Just very briefly, I represent ESOA, the European, Middle East and Africa Satellite Operators Association, which is part of a broader organization, the Global Satellite Coalition. So who are we? The GSC is an industry body made up of all satellite associations across the world, Asia, Europe, Middle East, Africa, the Americas, and so on. These are some of our members, and you will see some familiar names there: SES, Inmarsat, Intelsat, Eutelsat, Rascom, even some new kids on the block, SpaceX and OneWeb, etc. So it's a broad industry association. It's not a particular company pushing a particular view. Now, the role of satellite in 5G, and particularly in Africa. Satellites are an integral part of the ICT ecosystem, and we've heard from previous speakers that certain spectrum is suitable for urban areas, for high-density areas, and so on, and we totally agree with that. The role of satellite comes into its own in areas of low population density, the rural areas, and we must recognize that currently technologies are developing very rapidly, and they are bringing vast changes to our society wherever we live. Now, there are different technologies, as you can see here, which form up this heterogeneous ICT ecosystem, and satellite is an integral part of that system. You are aware that a GSO satellite, one satellite can cover a third of the world. Similarly, you've got satellite technology today where you can shape beams, and you could have a beam covering a particular country. Now, the satellite vision for 5G is that it's in line with the vision of the ITU, and it's important to realize that there's got to be a paradigm shift in 5G. 1G was analog, it was voiced, you got 2G, 3G, 4G. Now, once we get into the 5G environment, it's a network of networks. We need a paradigm shift. 5G is not just another G in the evolution of Gs. It is a totally new technology. And only by seeing 5G as this paradigm shift in connectivity, where there will be heterogeneous networks and integration of networks, where there is a role for both the MNOs and satellite, will 5G ever succeed? There are 4 satellite sweet spots in the 5G ecosystem. These are comms on the move, hybrid multiplay, trunking and head-end feeds, backhaul and tower feeds. And this is where satellite really comes into its own. And as I say, there is no way that satellite and mobile terrestrial technologies are mutually exclusive. They need to complement one another. There is a role for both of them. There have, of course, been advances in satellite technologies. Often when I speak to people, and I would mention the word satellite, there's two immediate reactions. One is that satellite is expensive, and the second is that satellite has limited bandwidth. That was the case previously. It is no longer the case. There have been major advances in satellite technologies. We now have more efficient payloads. You've got advanced propulsion systems. You've got better satellites, advanced beamforming techniques, and all of this leads to lower costs and higher output per satellite. So the innovative use of these new technologies is drastically reducing the cost of satellite connectivity and the cost per megabit. Now, of course, in order to provide these services, we come to the crunch. Satellites require suitable spectrum allocations. And with the forthcoming ITU World Radio Communication Conference taking place next month, allow me to just mention some of the issues which are critical to this. C-band is one of the core frequency bands for satellite. And yeah, I've just put up a couple of issues around C-band. Currently, there are more than 50 C-band satellites serving Africa. There are over 500 TV channels distributed in Africa by C-band. Nigeria, as a case in point, has more than 80 million people who rely on C-band for access to TV content. More than 20 million airline passengers rely on C-band. There are 4 C-band networks that provide radio navigation services across Africa. Each time any of us gets on an aeroplane and flies across Africa, the radio navigation systems on that aircraft rely on C-band satellite connectivity. So C-band remains the distribution platform of choice because it has large coverage. Economically, there are hundreds of thousands of earth stations around the world. And C-band, very importantly in the African context, is resilient to rain fade. It has these unique propagation characteristics which the higher frequency bands such as KU and KA do not have. So C-band usage varies across the world, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Each region has its own unique spectrum needs, and one size does not fit all. And this is something that WRC will need to look at. There are various proposals for various frequency bands, or at least for various, for C-band to be used by various IMT services. As far as possible, we would like to see the status quo remain because C-band is critical for satellite. These are existing services. They can't be migrated, and we need to protect these as far as possible. Coexistence between FSS and mobile services is an issue. The satellite signal, if we're speaking of geostationary satellites, receives its signal from 36,000 kilometers away. So that received signal is very low. Any terrestrial signal in the vicinity is going to kill that satellite signal.
2 more minutes.
Thank you. So satellite and IMT services cannot coexist in the same geographic area using the same frequency. There are, however, techniques for adjacent channel protection, and these would need to be looked at. We've spoken about spectrum being a limited resource, and previous speakers on this panel have spoken about a shortage of spectrum. This was a study that was done by LS Telecom in Germany last year, where they looked at IMT spectrum usage in Africa. And currently, less than 50% of the spectrum that has currently been allocated and identified for IMT has actually been licensed and being used. And our appeal is, please, before we start allocating or identifying additional spectrum for IMT, let's license spectrum that is already there. 28 gigahertz is ideal and is currently being used for satellites to provide broadband connectivity in rural areas. Due to the shortage of time, I'm not going to go through this, but please be aware that 28 gigahertz is currently a prime satellite band and is being used. Now, in conclusion, satellites, as I've said, are an integral part of the 5G system. GSC and SADC are working with 3GPP. They're working with other areas where testing has been done on 5G trials and demos using satellite. These have been very successful. So in conclusion, Chair, this is my final slide. Satellite is an integral part of today and tomorrow's digital ecosystem. 3.6 to 3.8 and 28 gigs are not on the WRC 15 shopping list, and please, let's keep it that way. There's plenty of other spectrum available for licensing and for use by IMT in Africa. There is no need to cut off international connectivity. IMT cannot replace these services, or terrestrial services cannot replace satellite services. And for these reasons, we are appealing that Africa maintains the position that C-band and 28 gigahertz should not be used for IMT. Africa needs satellite services to provide broadband connectivity to rural areas. This can't be done economically using terrestrial services. We do not have supporting terrestrial infrastructure in Africa in the form of roads, power, etc. So in rural areas, satellite plays a key function. And satellite, in order to provide these services, needs the spectrum that is currently allocated to it. We are not looking at additional spectrum, but we are asking, please protect our existing spectrum. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was my last presenter, and now I will allow for interventions from honorable ministers. But before I allow the interventions, before I forget the point which I had in mind, during the presentations, there was an extensive use of videos and very good slides. So if I can beg for your indulgence, if you provide those videos and slides to the Secretariat so that they can be available to the members, it will be a very good thing, so that the members can have the comfort of reviewing the same in the comfort of their rooms. Okay, thank you. Now, interventions from the honorable ministers. Do I see any flag? Or the presentation were just too clear? Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to first of all thank the presenters for very interesting and, as you say, clear presentations. My small intervention is on the presentation on smart corridors utilizing ICT and intelligent transport systems, which was done by Mr. Godwin Punungwe. Whilst we agree that the smart corridors are a very brilliant idea, and I believe they will remove bottlenecks from our borders, which are a nightmare for trade and movement of goods, I, however, would like to know how we can have the same technology without first harmonizing our customs rules and processes in our countries. I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think the presentations were very clear, and I've got only one intervention. Now, Mr. Godwin, can you assist us with that brilliant idea? How can we have the same technology without harmonizing our customs? Whatever. Thank you.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Honorable Minister, for your question. Clearly, I didn't have enough time to explain. As you can see, I was under tremendous pressure here to do it within the time. But one of the key things in trade facilitation in this concept of smart corridor, it's really that it's cross-cutting. You cannot say I'm dealing with on the transport without dealing on the customs. What I'm getting at here is that there is need for also on the customs rules and processes to be also harmonized and streamlined and also automated and be able to speak to each other. You know, the idea that on one side of the Bible bridge you declare something different from when you have crossed really should not be happening in this day and age. The systems should be able to talk to each other that before something is declared, whether it's at Durban, you get the Bible bridge, they already know what they are coming with. If you cross the border to Zambia, they already know. There's no reason of declaring anything because it's supposed to be there. So we are really saying, in terms of smart corridors, let's connect our systems. Let's bring in transparency. And they will be amazed how much it will save in terms of revenue, of money which is leaking through the systems because it's not automated. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. I think I don't have any further interventions. That was a very good sign that you presenters did a very good job. So can you please join your hands to give them an applause for doing such a wonderful job, which didn't need much intervention from the floor. Thank you very, very much. Okay, thank you. Now, can I allow the Director of Ceremonies to give us some housekeeping announcements? For the presenters, we are done. Please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. Let's give them actually heavy claps to the presenters. Yeah, Honorable Chair, there is something they want to make a quick summary.
Yes. Some housekeeping announcements? Okay, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to give a quick summary to conclude the dialogue which we had today. Honorable Ministers, Permanent Secretaries, distinguished colleagues, as was said by our Director of Infrastructure, we had a very interesting discussions during this dialogue, which will shape our programs, paying particular attention to the member states' priorities. The needs and intervention by the honorable ministers provided us with the guide and support and direction in developing infrastructure projects and programs, including soft projects. We thank all the honorable ministers, experts, for the keynote addresses, the talks and interventions, and discussions. And as a region, it gave us an opportunity to shape the future of our region. Honorable ministers are no longer just meeting for their consultations on the prior deliberations by the permanent secretaries and senior officials, but they are meeting to discuss and have inputs to our programs. Interest is growing for the dialogue sessions and for the future programs we are going to consider to provide more time for the sessions. We captured the proceedings, the key issues, what are the things we need to do when you go back home. And the summary is a document with the things we need to go back and do. And I think, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, this document, we are going to print it and circulate tomorrow to all the member states for them to consider when adopting the deliberations tomorrow. So this document will be printed and circulated for adoption tomorrow.